Hello and welcome to my video all about how to bind off in pattern. Binding off in pattern is a method of binding off which can be done with all sorts of patterns, usually knit and purl patterns. It works best with ribbing patterns such as 1x1 or 2x2 ribbing, and that's nearly always when you'll see this technique in use, although it can also be used for other knit and purl patterns such as seed stitch or moss stitch. The advantage of it is that the bound off edge blends in a lot better with the stitches of your pattern. For this sample of 2x2 ribbing, I began with the alternating long tail cast on, which is basically a way of casting on in pattern. In order to bind off in pattern, you just need to continue with the established pattern as you bind off. And in this case, the established pattern is 2x2 rib. I've just finished knitting a right side row, so now I need to do a wrong side row. Remember that in ribbing, all you're doing is knitting the knits and purling the purls. Okay, so the first two stitches in the next line of pattern are purl stitches, so make sure the working yarn is at the front and purl 2. It doesn't matter what pattern you're following, you just need to continue it. Then you need to bind off one stitch. So use your left hand needle to pick up the lowest stitch on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above and drop it off the end of the needle. And this will leave you with one stitch on the right hand needle. Then from now onwards you need to repeat the same process over and over. So you need to do the next stitch in the pattern and then bind off one stitch. So in this case, the next stitch is a knit stitch, so that's what we're going to do. And then we need to bind off a stitch. So use your left hand needle to pick up the lowest stitch down on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above, and drop it off the end of the needle. Then do another knit stitch, and bind off one stitch. And then we're on to the purl stitches again, so bring the working yarn to the front and purl one, and then bind off a stitch. Then another purl stitch, and bind off a stitch. And then we're on to the knit stitches again, so take the working yarn to the back and knit one, and bind off one, knit one, and bind off a stitch, and so on. And you just continue to follow this established pattern until you've only got one stitch left. Just make sure that the working yarn is always at the back for a knit stitch and at the front for a purl stitch. Then you need to cut the yarn to leave you with a yarn tail at least 8 inches long. Take this yarn tail through the last stitch and tighten. And then you just need to weave in the yarn tails. And here you can see the final comparison, where in one sample I cast on and bound off in pattern, and on the other sample I cast on using the regular long tail cast on and bound off with the knit bind off method. What happens when you don't cast on and bind off in pattern is that you get these uniform bands across the top and bottom edges, and as you can see they kind of stand out. I'm sure you'll agree that binding off in pattern makes the bound off edge blend in a lot better. And that's it, that's how you bind off in pattern. I really hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.